So hello, everybody. Welcome. We're so glad you could join us today. I'm Wendy Perrin with WendyPerrin.com, and we're a trip planning and travel advice website. And we are going to be talking today about how to get more for your miles and points and really maximize the value you can get from them this year, 2023. Let me first introduce my colleague, Brooke Wilkinson. Brooke, you want to say hi?
Everyone, thanks so much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed the travel talks this week. As with the previous day's talks, we'll be leaving a lot of time for Q&A. Put any questions you have in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can.
Great, awesome. Thank you, Brooke. And I also just want to thank our sponsor of Wow Week, MedJet, which is a global medical transport and travel security and crisis response membership for a variety of different types of travel emergencies when you're traveling, especially if you're stuck in a hospital and you want to get back to your doctor at home fast. So thank you, MedJet, for sponsoring Wow Week. And now I want to introduce our special guest, Gary Leff. Gary, who I've known for many years now, writes a View from the Wing blog. And he also started a service called Book Your Award that was so helpful to, and is so helpful to so many people who are desperate to use their miles and points, like let's say for international business class flights. And that recently merged into Point.me. And we're going to hear about what that is in a little while. But the most important thing about Gary, I just want you guys to know, is that he seriously has transformed my travel. I have been able to get to places I never would have been able to afford to get to because of his tips and tricks for how to use your miles and points. And I just know that he can transform your travels as well. And I mean, this is not an exaggeration, Gary. I can't tell you how many places I've been able to go because of your help. So thank you.
No, that's that's great, and thank you, Wendy. It's I can say the same thing for myself, right? Because I never thought of myself growing up as somebody that would travel the world the way that I've been able to. Somebody that would travel in premium cabins. I was a little kid. I traveled, a little bit, and I would always look up at that, forward cabin and think, well, that's never going to be me for two reasons. I mean, I'd never be able to afford it. And even if I could I imagine spending that kind of money? And then all of a sudden, I graduated college and I'm just traveling for work. And I'm by my nature, the kind of person that reads the fine print on things, right? And so you used to send you in the mail all of the frequent flyer statements and offers. And so I would read them. And I was like, wait a minute, this is pretty good. If I eat at these 4 restaurants, I earn these bonus points. Wait a minute, it doesn't say a minimum number of spend at any of them. I can go get a soda, and this is enough bonus points for a ticket, right? I mean, in fact, I remember there was a time that you could get free tickets with soda cups from Wendy's many years ago, right? Of course, I wasn't so into this myself, but people went dumpster diving, right? Because they got like free tickets, and but miles and points have made it possible for me to travel in a very different, much less constrained way as well, where I've been able to say that every trip that I take doesn't have to be perfect, because if I enjoy something, I don't have to get everything in. If I can go back, and it's much more freeing. And if a trip doesn't work out the way that I wanted it to, right, I have points that'll get me on other flights. And so it's just across the board, made my travel better. But I will say that it's harder at times to make use of points now than it's been at in a variety of other times. I think back to a golden age, to a dozen years ago. I had somebody call me up and ask if I could help them get their family of 8 in first class from Mexico City to somewhere in Europe. And of course, they all wanted to be on the same flight. In 2009, 2010, my answer could be yes. And no, there's no way. And I don't like saying no to anything. I much prefer what I can do for you is, right? So it is important to attenuate expectations. I once had somebody come to me and say, family of 6, we want to go to Australia for Christmas and New Year's, right? In first class. Like, okay, it's Australia's about as tough an award as there is to begin with. 1 seat doable, 2 seats harder, 3 seats. There's a family of 6, and they're not interested in business class, right? It's got to be. And so, okay, what I can do for you is, it turns out, not only we're talking peak of peak dates, Christmas and New Year's, but I said, well, if we could do 3 and 3 or 4 and 2 on these flights and meet up, I can make this work in business class. And the response that I got was, I knew these miles were worthless. Like,
Oh my God.
right?
Some people.
Okay. No, I mean, it's important to recognize, I think fundamentally, airlines are going to make the best award space available on seats that they don't believe they're likely to sell for a premium. And so if you're going somewhere, peak of peak time, when everyone else wants to go, when all the flights are going to be full, it's going to be really difficult if you're saying, I have to have this one specific flight, right? But if you say, look, I need to get from this city to that city, here's my flexibility. I could travel the next day. I'm willing to connect. Right now, all of a sudden we start to have more options, and even better. I'm always for lots of reasons and across all sorts of elements of travel. I love shoulder season, right? I love deals, and I love, frankly, just when there aren't as many people around the places that I'm going. I go to Europe in the summer. I don't want to leave the U.S. to go find a whole bunch of American teenagers, right? So if I'm trying to go somewhere when not everybody's trying to go there, I have a much better opportunity. And what we've had right now is this weird mismatch between demand and supply, as everyone started to travel again, and airlines in many ways weren't ready for that. So they weren't fully rebuilt, having rebuilt their capacity. And as a result, it became very difficult, in some cases, even to get seats on some flights. And using miles then for those seats became a challenge. I think over time, these things, calibrate. You say, okay, they fully bring back their schedules. Some of this excess demand, we stayed home for a while. Now we're not so much, and now we're out. It just normalizes, and we re-enter a more normal period. And I figure, look, I'm still getting great deals on miles. My family travels, and now that I have a daughter, I'm not just looking for 2 seats, I'm looking for 3 seats, and we travel, all over the place. My number one destination personally is Australia, because I, have family there, and so I've been going there for 43 years now, or some such. And those are hard seats, but so I watch for them, and when they come up, I book them. And one of the great things about miles is how flexible they are. A lot of programs now don't have fees for canceling a trip and redepositing the miles. And so what I'll often do is I will book a kind of a worst case scenario itinerary and say, okay, this is, if I'm stuck with this is what I'll do. And then now I can have my trip. And since it's a few months until I'm traveling, I'm just going to keep checking and see if I find something better. And it's not going to cost me anything to rebook. Or I see great award seats and I book them. And then I say, well, maybe I want the trip. And if I don't, I cancel, right? So the great flexibility that's come out of the pandemic that's stayed in the loyalty program. So, a lot of the major ones don't have those cancel and redeposit fees, which, by the way, is a great trick for even when you're, say, buying a ticket at the holidays domestically. Say, for instance, that you were buying a ticket on United Airlines for Christmas and just traveling to Florida or wherever. I might book an award itinerary on American for 6 or 8 hours later. And if my United flight goes off just fine, I cancel the American itinerary. But I've given myself a backup with miles that's basically no cost as my own insurance policy to get where I'm going. And so we used to say, look, I've never used miles domestically. It's not exactly true anymore. I would use them as a backup if I really needed them. And I might lock in that backup. So they can be really interesting. But I'm blathering on, and so I know you've got a list of things that you know that your readers have asked me to cover. So why don't we talk about some of those?
Well, we're definitely going to get to those, but I just want to, it seems like there are a few other sort of new things that people should know for 2023. Just, trends and what to know. Like, for instance, you were saying that I guess if your goal is to fly in business class, using your miles or points for award tickets is better than using them to upgrade, right? It used to be that you would pay for a ticket and then upgrade, and that was a great way of using your miles, but that's changed.
Most of the time that has changed. There are, as with all of these things, there are some, except for, kinds of examples. So for instance, if you're using British Airways miles to upgrade on British Airways, buying a premium economy seat and using miles to get into business, it's the same availability whether you're upgrading or redeeming for an award ticket, and you can save quite a few miles. But as a general matter, it's a lot easier to do a long haul international trip as an award than as an upgrade, because of alliances and partnerships. If I'm using United miles and I want to get to Eastern Europe, now maybe I'm flying Turkish, maybe I'm flying not Polish, maybe I'm flying Austrian, or I'm flying Lufthansa or Swiss. If I'm upgrading, for the most part, I'm limited to United flights. You can upgrade on their partners, but then you're having to pay higher fares for the chance to do it. And it's cumbersome. You're spending points separately for each flight segment. You just have a lot more options with awards than you do with upgrades. So combinations, and you generally need to be using the airline's miles that you're flying on to upgrade, with some modest exceptions, whereas I can use United miles and fly in Air Canada and vice versa. So just lots more options for awards.
Gary, which airlines have the most award seats? I feel like there are some real tricks to knowing where are you going to find the best award availability, and to which places?
The best award availability usually comes back to what I was saying earlier about flying on flights that aren't selling out. So, interestingly, all three of the largest Mideast airlines fly to Washington Dulles Airport. There's simply not that much demand between Washington, D.C. and Doha, Dubai, and Abu Dhabi, or for that matter, connecting through to India and Pakistan, right? And so Etihad's flight from Washington Dulles is often often their best flight to get award seats on. Similarly, their the Qatar Airways Washington Dulles flight can be a really good flight for that. Qatar is a member of One World. One World partners don't have a hub there. They're not feeding any connecting traffic, so they're sending planes out without a lot of passengers, and they'll make award seats available. And that's really what you're looking for. There are airlines and routes, and everyone has kind of a different approach. It used to be, you think, okay, I need to book 331 days in advance, right? And as soon as the schedule loads, I get my award seat. And if I call up at 12:01 a.m. and they tell me it's not available, somebody must have beaten me to it. Right? That's not the model anymore. It turns out that there are a few airlines that do load award seats right when their schedules load. British Airways has committed to do it. Qatar Airways has committed to do it. They kind of do it, but more in waves, not always the moment it happens. It's often, Qantas will, but what airlines are doing is saying, look, 11 months in the future, or even almost 12 months in the future, we may not have that much knowledge about how much demand there's going to be for a given flight, what the economy is going to look like, and all of this. So we may wait. I find that in general, 6 months out is a really good time to be booking. If you're looking 3 months out, that can be hard. A lot of the early seats are gone, and then airlines haven't necessarily added the additional seats that they say, okay, we're not going to sell these, so we'll make awards available yet. So that said, when I think about the Etihad and Qatar Airways models in Washington Dulles, Turkish Airlines, it goes in waves, but they have a lot of US flights. And there will be times at which their award space is really good. And you can use United miles to book them. You can use Air Canada's miles to book them. It's really quite easy to get those seats. Yesterday, Port TAP Air Portugal had out of New York, 9 business class award seats on like most of their flights wide open. So some of these go in waves as well.
How about Singapore? Doesn't it release a lot of international business class, like, a year ahead? And isn't it a good way to get to Europe or Japan?
Yeah, so Singapore Airlines is unique. They have, for a couple of reasons. They don't just fly to Singapore, although of course, flying from the US to Singapore and then connecting elsewhere in Asia is something that you can do with them. But they have these Fifth Freedom routes from New York JFK to Frankfurt, from Houston to Manchester, as well as Los Angeles to Tokyo. They haven't restarted their San Francisco, Hong Kong flight yet. But these flights are really useful as well. And they do release seats generally, if you're looking 10, 11 months out, and especially on these Fifth Freedom routes, award space is really good. Now, to get those seats, and I saw somebody early on and asked this in the Q&A, you're not going, Singapore Airlines is a member of the Star Alliance, but you're not going to be able to use your United miles to book business class or first class on Singapore long haul. For years, they didn't allow any of their partners to book it. Now, to a certain extent, you can use miles with their partners, Alaska, Air Canada, and Lufthansa, but not as much availability as if you're using Singapore's own miles. The good news is that Singapore's miles are really easy to get because any of the credit card transferable currencies move to Singapore. So if you have American Express points, those move to Singapore Airlines, Chase, Citibank, Capital One, Bilt, they all partner with Singapore. And American Express has improved. Well, if you call Singapore instead of just using the website, they will put the award on hold until you transfer the points. If sometimes an agent will tell you they can't, hang up and call back and talk to another agent. But American Express has done really good job of improving the times that it takes to transfer points. So a lot of what we used to know about how long it would take for points to show up in an account after you transfer isn't true anymore. So Amex to Singapore is now instant. At least every time in my experience. It may be that it can delay a few minutes, but generally, you can move it right away. And so then you can grab those award seats. And they also have incrementally more availability for a small number of extra points. For instance, the other day I wrote about looking 10 months out into the future, availability every day of the month. And I can't remember if I looked at October or November, but every single day, both directions for multiple seats, New York JFK to Frankfurt. If you were willing, instead of just paying 81,000 points, on some days it required 87,500, right? And that's opened things up, and that there were days that had 5 and even 9 seats available so that you could be taking the whole family. And it often is these foreign carriers that have the excess capacity, that they've committed to flying to a destination in the United States, and it may not be fully supported by demand or by, because of DC and they have political reasons, or there may be cargo contracts. There are reasons why they're flying there, and they'll make those seats available on points.
Gary, what about Air France also? Isn't it relatively easy to I mean, I think one thing people really need to understand is it can be very difficult to use your miles on American or Delta or United. Yeah. But if you look at foreign airlines, often you can.
Yes, and Air France makes more seats available to people using their own points than to people using points with their partners like Delta. And they do make quite a lot more reasonably priced awards available. I flew them back from Paris last year. I will fly them back from Paris in several weeks. getting the seats for the three of us, my family, has not been has fortunately not been a problem. But it does go in waves, and booking farther in advance helps. And if you're talking about peak of peak days, Air France is not likely to help you when they know they're going to sell those seats. But they do have a lot of extra seats on routes like Chicago and Dallas and Houston, and they have so many flights out of New York. And as I was talking about earlier, Washington Dulles, because they don't have any connecting traffic there. So it's just the local DC market, and they've got a couple of flights. So they have so many flights to the US. Is the other thing that if I'm in Austin, I don't really care if I catch the Paris Dallas or Paris Houston flight. Now I may need to either book a separate ticket with points or with miles, or if it's Houston, maybe I want to drive or stay the night and see friends. But I may not be getting all the way back to Austin that way. But at that point, maybe then I'll even take the Chicago flight, right? And now I've got all these options, and I have to combine it with something that gets me that last mile where I need space on a US airline.
Should we turn to some of the questions? That there are a whole lot of questions here, and I'm sure people are desperate for answers. I mean, Brooke, do you want to? You've been looking over them. Do you want to ask some of them?
Sure. Well, we'll start at the top. Nancy asked, "How do you get free tickets on Turkish with United Miles?"
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're using United Miles and you want to travel on Turkish, you can literally search the United.com website, because it'll appear if it is available. I don't always trust United's website. If I want to verify something, maybe I'll check the Air Canada website, which does a really good job with award search, but doesn't have the friendly features like the award calendar. But yeah, that's bookable on the Turkish website. I'm sorry, on the United website. The reverse is a really, really interesting thing in miles and points. Turkish Airlines has their Miles and Smiles frequent flyer program, and they are a partner of Citibank's program. They are a partner of Bilt's program. They're a partner of Capital One. And if you want to fly, it's often you're not getting such a great value using miles domestically. But if there is Savor Award space on United, there's no cheaper way to book that than through Turkish's own program. They charge each way 7,500 miles for coach, and 12,500 miles for the premium cabin. And by the way, that includes Hawaii and from the East Coast. So 25,000 miles round trip. Now, you have to find United Savor availability, number one. Number two, Turkish's technology, their website will often fail. So you wind up calling, and maybe they're not helpful. Like I have found myself faxing the Turkish LA ticket office to do this. And not everyone has the stomach for this, but in terms of making your points go really far, they also offer more availability to their own members than they do to United or other partners. And so, and they charge 90,000 miles round trip to Europe. So you might pay 77,000 United miles to fly Turkish one way with United, your United Mileage Plus account, or 90,000 plus fuel surcharges round trip through Turkish. So great value, but you've got to really be willing to deal with the frustration of working with the Turkish Airlines Miles and Smiles program to get there.
Now, I had a issue with United and Turkish when I flew to Egypt last November. The best schedule from SFO was on Turkish through Istanbul, and I was kind of happy. United's my most common carrier,
Sure.
in San Francisco. And I thought, well, I can at least earn some United miles. Maybe it'll even bump me up to the next, Mileage Plus category for next year. Got home from this trip, and we were a family of three. So we're doing, all three of us are going to get all these frequent flyer miles. I get home, I'm waiting for the miles to deposit in my account. I'm waiting. They don't show up. I booked a fare class that does not deliver miles. How often does that crop up? And
yeah, this is very annoying. What I like is a website called wheretocredit.com, and you enter the airline that you're flying and the fare class of your ticket. You do need to know the fare class of your ticket. And this is going to tell you how many miles you can earn in each of the airline's partner frequent flyer programs. Because it can, in the really cheap tickets or the cheapest fare class, it may not be that cheap. It can be 0, it could be 10%. And then in some of the partners, it could be, 1 mile per mile flown. And so you say, well, maybe I'd give up those United miles. Maybe I want to credit to Air Canada, or I want to join Turkish's program, knowing that, hey, if I have those points, maybe I'll use it for a United flight, right? So, but you have to know that it's the first letter of the fare basis is your fare class, and it's not always obvious on different airline receipts. You can call, you can ask.
And you'd want to know it before you book.
If you care about yes.
Yeah. If it would have changed my decision about what to fly. Yeah.
Sometimes the difference in price is really small. So, domestically, if there's confirmable upgrade space on American, I use their points in their business program, which has minimum fare class requirements. Sometimes I have to pay an extra, $30 or $40, but I can confirm, first class, right? Like I'll do that.
Absolutely. So Tim asks, we've had the same points credit card for years. Should we be updating to a new card to take advantage of the signing bonuses? We have some major purchases coming up and could make the minimum spending qualifier within the time frame they usually require.
So, so first I'll say, look, if a bank wants to give you a whole lot of miles, like you can say yes. Okay. But I think it's useful to have a framework and a starting place of what you want to do with the points. When I was really young and getting started with this, like I would, oh, here's a great deal, and I'd like sign up, and it'd be in a program where the points expire, and I'd be desperately trying to use the points that I had gotten. You really want to have your credit card choices align with your travel goals and plan. A credit card really does 3 separate things for you, and you want to think about them separately. It can 3 ways of providing you value. There is that initial bonus, which can be really valuable. The card company wants to get your attention, get you to act, get to acquire you as a customer, and they spend a lot of money to do that. And that's a great reason. It can be, if the points are useful to you, great reason to get the card. It's not necessarily a great reason to continue holding on to that card over time, or to keep spending money on it after you've earned that bonus. The second thing that a card does for you is it may have benefits. So it may give you lounge access, or a companion ticket, or elite status in a partner program. There are lots of things that you can get for having the card: free checked bags, priority boarding. But that may not be and it can be a reason to keep the card, right? The value of those benefits to you is worth more than an annual fee on the card, but it's not necessarily a reason to continue to spend money on the card. So for your actual ongoing spend, what I want is the most value possible in rewards for that spending. So there's times when maybe it is credit towards my elite status. I mean, that's fine. Or it's just the most valuable points I can earn, which is usually earning more than 1 point per dollar. I generally want to avoid earning just 1 point per dollar. And the good news is you usually don't need to, because the best solution for credit cards is usually more than one. But here's a very simple example. If you were to have the Chase Sapphire Reserve card that earns 3 points per dollar on your travel and dining, right? A lot of these cards have 3, 2, and 1 formulas. It's fine to spend in that 3, the accelerator category that's earning you 3 points per dollar. But you still want to stay in the Chase ecosystem, right? At least get a Chase Freedom Unlimited card that earns you 1.5 points per dollar instead of 1. And if you had a normal Freedom Unlimited without the reserve, you couldn't transfer those points to an airline or hotel program, but you can transfer them from your Freedom Flex, they call it, to your Sapphire Reserve account, and the points become worth more. And so the worst case is there. In that case, you're earning 1.5 points per dollar. And so you don't use the Sapphire Reserve on any of your spending that would earn not in a bonus category. So now back to the question of, is it worth thinking about a bonus? Look, if it's if they want to give me 100,000 points, I'll pay attention, and I will try out the card. And if the card, if the value proposition of the bonus is large enough, relative to any fee that I have to pay, and then evaluate whether it makes sense to keep.
Got it. Jeff asks, if you book an award flight and later discover the prices in miles has decreased, can you rebook at the lower price and have your account credited for the difference?
The answer is yes, asterisk, it can be complicated. So in the simplest form, if you use American Airlines miles to book an American Airlines award trip and the price in American miles falls, sure, call up, they'll credit you back the difference. That's no big deal. If you were using American miles to book an award ticket on Cathay Pacific, right? And the price falls, you're actually going to cancel your ticket, and there's no longer a fee to do that, and rebook. The thing to make sure is that all of the flight segments are in fact available. So you might be searching, oh, Cathay Pacific's available from San Francisco to Hong Kong. And is the connecting flight from Hong Kong to Bangkok available still in business, or am I seeing something in coach? Right? Because they're not just going to give you back the miles, you have to cancel. And if you had business the whole way, maybe you're happy. Maybe it's available in coach, you're willing to downgrade for the couple hour flight, save those miles, but just make sure that you know what actually is available, because you're not just getting miles back, you're actually canceling and rebooking, and with especially with a partner.
Meher asks, can a combination of miles and dollars be used if I do not have enough miles? Can you combine programs?
Well, so combining cash and points, generally, yes. It's usually not a great deal. It's something that you can do pretty easily during the booking path with British Airways, with Air Canada, where you are basically just buying down the required number of miles for an award ticket. And that may make sense. It can be a lot of cash relative to the points, but it may make sense. That's very different than an airline that will let you buy down part of the paid fare with your miles. And they might give you, 1 cent per point in value for those miles that then reduces how much the ticket costs, right? That's different than booking an award per se. It's using your miles as cash. And that, as I say, you're going to get a penny a point, which if there's stranded points that you're not going to leverage for a whole lot of value, then okay, maybe it makes sense for you, but you're not getting tremendous value that way.
Sorry asks, I have a lot of Amex Platinum and Chase Sapphire miles. How do I navigate where to get the most bang for my miles, mainly for airfare? For example, transferring from Amex to Avios to book a BA flight for less miles than from Amex to BA. Is there an app or website that shows the best awards for various routes, or am I just dreaming?
Funny you should ask. Wendy was mentioning earlier my association with Point.me. Where you can go and enter the city you're flying from and flying to, and it will show you all of the available award seats across over 30 different frequent flyer programs that it'll check in real time. And then it will tell you how to book those seats. It'll say, okay, you have Chase points. And by the way, you can tell it what you have, so it limits the search only the things relevant to you and walks you through only the things that are going to help you. It'll show you which program to transfer to for the best deal. It'll show you how to make the transfer. There's literally graphics on the screen that will walk you through the Chase website and making a points transfer, right? That will walk you through searching for the flight on the airline website and going through and making the booking. And that is that's a self-serve tool that we offer. We also offer concierge booking, and that's what my Book Your Award service always has been, where you just say, okay, here's the points we have, here's where I want to go, figure it out for me and do it. And I had asked them earlier today for our premium service. I said, if you give me a coupon code for 10% off a membership, promo code Perrin. we'll do 10% off at the point.me website for a premium membership. But so the answer is yes, this exists. And by the way, in the example of transferring Chase points to British Airways, the executive club, to fly BA, it's actually often two tips. I mean, the thing that's really good is that they offer a lot of award space on BA. They have a lot of flights to the US, they have a lot of seats, and a lot of awards. The big downside is the fuel surcharges that get billed in addition to the points. And on a business class round trip, taxes and fuel surcharges through BA, if you book US to Europe and back, could be $1,500. There are a couple of ways to reduce that. One is book 2 one-way tickets, because a trip originating in Europe has lower fuel surcharges. So you save several $100s that way. Another is, instead of booking through British Airways, book through their partner Cathay Pacific. If you transfer to Asia Miles from, say, the American Express program, then they charge order of magnitude a third of what BA charges in cash. So there's quite a bit of savings there.
So Allison's asking a little bit more to understand about point.me and the point strategy consulting, perhaps. She says, I'm ready to make the leap to credit card awards, but completely overwhelmed figuring out best one to start with. I feel you, Allison. I'm in the same position.
Well,
she also lives in the Bay Area and specifically interested in improving flight experience internationally, not in basic economy. And when possible, on my domestic flights, United is an obvious choice. Also SW.
Well, that is literally something that the premium service at point.me offers, including telephone consultation. Because we want to start with, what are your actual goals? What are you trying to get out of your points? What do you spend money on? So how can we align? What's the best credit card? What do you care about in terms of your trip experience? Is it the premium cabin? Do you want to have something that gets you into the right lounges? Does status matter? Right? What are the things that are important to you? And then aligning the credit cards with the goals and the kind of spending that you do to earn the most number of the most valuable points for your goal. And that's a very individualized process, because it really does start with goals. But yeah, come to the website, and happy to figure that out with you.
And we've got a couple questions about the website. So it's point.me instead of .com. It's point.me
That's right.
The website. Anne asked, does it affect your credit rating if you cancel a lot of credit cards, if they're no longer useful?
Yeah. I mean, the answer is yes, but not always in the way that you might think. In general, what you want is to be responsible with credit, right? So if you're paying off your bills every month, then that is good for your score. If you are not, that's really bad. You also want to show that you can have a lot of credit without maxing it out all the time. Very big component of your score is credit utilization ratio. So if you have, say, $5,000 of available credit on your cards, and every month you spend $2,500 on credit cards, you're using 50% of your available credit, right? And that is like, okay, wait a minute, maybe you're on the verge of maxing out. We want to be a little bit careful with you. But then all of a sudden, if you have $25,000 of available credit, your utilization ratio is 10%. This is how responsible you are with credit. That's good for your score, right? Because you can have this credit and you're not always maxing. You're not a risk. You don't appear as though you're someone likely to default. When you apply for credit and have what's called a hard pull on your credit score, on your credit report, that can ding your score a few points, 2 to 5 points. That will last for a couple of years on your report. But if you're getting more available credit and reducing your utilization, the net effect could be that your score goes up. If you cancel a card, you're going to, the way that can hurt you is you're going to lose some of your available credit, but a canceled card will stay on your report for 7 years. So it'll affect your available credit in the future. What I actually like to do when I cancel a card is some issuers will allow me to transfer the credit from a card that I'm moving to another card that I have open. And so I keep the credit, I just don't have to keep the card. It's something I've done in the past with American Express and with Chase. But in general, if you've got a 760 score or above, it doesn't help you to have scores that are much higher than that. It feels like you feel bad. Oh my gosh, my score is falling. And if you're not taking on significant debt, like refinancing a mortgage or taking out a mortgage in the near term, it's not something to be scared of. I do, however, caution people not to do anything that messes with their credit or cards when they're going into the mortgage market. Right now, I've never seen anyone say you don't get it. You don't get this because you have too many cards. I have seen, folks say, maybe you want to pare this back a little bit. But again, I'm very cautious with anything as you go into the mortgage market, because anything that would influence your mortgage costs is going to be a bigger deal for you than the rewards that you would lose in the meantime. So just put that off a little bit.
You spoke earlier about how it can be more effective these days to buy a premium class seat rather than upgrading with miles. Kathy asked, can Chase preferred points be used to upgrade existing tickets from business class to first class in this case? Okay,
so there's a few things here. If you're transferring points from Chase or from American Express, Capital One into a frequent flyer program, those frequent flyer program points can be used to upgrade a paid ticket if there is availability in the desired cabin for an upgrade. Separately from that, you can often use points to buy up or pay the difference. American Express has a program with the folks who handle bidding for upgrades, where you can use your points to pay the cash cost of the bid, but you're getting a very low value for your points that way. If what you want is leverage for your points, if you were looking to upgrade from business to first on Emirates and you had Chase points that are transferable, so a Sapphire Reserve or a Sapphire Preferred or an Ink Business Preferred, then you would transfer them. You would check and see if there's upgrade space available in Emirates. You would transfer your points to Emirates and redeem the upgrade.
Julie asked, will you touch on hotel points briefly?
Sure. Anything in particular about them? Because it's a very big topic.
Yeah, that's all she said.
Is something different for 2023 with hotel? I feel like for a while there, hotel points were really getting devalued. Has something changed?
They've gotten devalued more. Okay. No, seriously. In terms of transferring points from a bank program like Membership Rewards or Chase or Capital One or anything, the only hotel transfers that have significant value, unless you're just topping off an account to get to a specific award where you already have most of the points. The only one where there's direct value in just transferring is Chase and Bilt Rewards to Hyatt. Their awards are still quite reasonable. But in terms of redemptions, you will usually find the greatest value at the complete opposite ends of the spectrum. The absolute cheapest awards, those category 1 kinds of hotels, that may be nice in inexpensive parts of the world, will often give you a really good value per point. And then the really expensive hotels, where they're so expensive, but there's a maximum number of points they'll charge you in the program, you can get a really good deal as well. So, I thought I got a great deal this past weekend, as I said, at Point Grace in Turks, right? Where it's an SLH hotel that partners with Hyatt, and Hyatt points can be used at most of the SLH hotels. And it was 40,000 Hyatt points against, depending on the night, that between $1,600 and $2,000 a night. right? So it's 4 to 5 cents per point redemption. Whereas candidly, I'm not going to be spending that kind of money on my own like vacation, but I'm comfortable, transferring points from Chase or using points from a Hyatt account. I also find Hyatt in general has the best elite program for people who do stay frequently, if you're able to earn their top globalist status. Because unlike programs that will give you maybe an upgrade or even a suite if it's available when you check in, with Hyatt, you can do that several times per year at time of booking. And for me, I really value the suite because now that I'm traveling with my wife and my daughter, we want that extra room. She goes to sleep earlier than we do. She wakes up after we do. So having the extra room matters. And so Hyatt is by far the best for suite upgrades if you earn their what they call globalist status at 60 nights. They'll actually give you some suite upgrades at 50. For people who don't stay nearly so much, IHG a year ago really improved their program. So that's your Intercontinental, Holiday Inn, Kimpton, and some also really nice, Mr. and Mrs. Smiths and some of these others. They even will now confirm upgrades that you can start earning these after 20 nights in a year. You can earn your first one as a choice benefit. That can be confirmed 14 days in advance of travel on a non-prepaid paid rate. So if you spent 20 nights in middle America Holiday Inn Expresses for work, if that happens to be you, and you say, well, and then I'm going to go for a week with my family to a really nice Intercontinental, and you book it 2 weeks out, making sure that the suite's available, you can confirm that suite at the time of booking as a benefit. So there are some things that are there. In general, the challenge, some of the really nice hotels have made getting awards more difficult, and the chains haven't always pushed back. I find Marriott has a great program on paper. A lot of hotels just aren't super compliant, and they haven't done enough, in my opinion, as a chain to really get the hotels in line delivering the promised benefits, which is the exact opposite of who Marriott used to be. Just complete consistency with every stay was their corporate model. And since they acquired Starwood, that it seems to have flipped, where they're more interested in just not making their owners angry than they are in ensuring the consistent guest experience. Starwood was really steeped in Six Sigma, like as well. They were always, so they made sure to deliver, every time, and they promised a lot. Marriott delivered every time and didn't overpromise. And now it's kind of like they have the promise, but not the delivery, in my view.
Sorry asks, do you think that for a frequent and a world traveler, Chase Sapphire Preferred and Amex Platinum are worth the fees these days, which keep going up?
Well, you need to look at the fee and the value that you get for it. So take Amex Platinum. It works for me, and I'll tell you why. So because of all the fee credits that I'm using to offset real expenses I would otherwise have, I'm paying for the card. I use my $200 airline fee credit. And the way that I happen to use it, you choose one airline, and then it's supposed to cover, incidental fees. I live in Austin. The largest airline in Austin is Southwest. And there's a little quirk about Southwest where tickets under $100 have been treated as fees by American Express. And so I buy $99 tickets, cancel them, and now I have $99 credits. No guarantee that this will continue to work. I have no idea. It could end tomorrow, but that's what I've done for the last several years. I get $200 in value from that. There's $200 in Uber credits. I use Uber Eats, right? So it's real money for me. I get my $189 clear credit, right? That is also real money. I'm going to pay for clear for myself and for my wife. And so it's covering money I otherwise would spend. Similarly, they have $20 a month in a digital entertainment credit, which is what covers my NewYorkTimes.com. It covers my Sirius XM, both of those completely. And so like my New York Times is a little more expensive because my wife likes the New York Times cooking. Right. And so so point being, like, I'm paying for this stuff. So now all of a sudden, I'm well over the cost of the annual fee in real cash savings. And so then I say, yeah, maybe the lines are longer, the lounges are crowded, more crowded than I want, but I'm not using that as part of the justification for why I'm keeping the card. Now, what do I put in terms of spending on that card? Frankly, really only airfare that earns 5 points per dollar with membership rewards. Everything else, well, not everything, there are some other bonus, but most everything else is earning 1 point per dollar, and I can do better on other cards. That to me is a card that I keep for the benefits that are worth more than the annual fee. And I have to keep reevaluating that. Like I don't happen to value the Walmart Plus they'll give you, which to me is the most off-brand partnership that I could imagine. But it's more of a personal one, the Amex person that went to Walmart to run the program. But it's so yes, it makes sense for me, but it won't make sense for everyone in every circumstance. And that's what you have to, that's the analysis that you need to go through on a card.
Mhm. It's really interesting. Rita asks, the airlines are charging an exorbitant number of miles now to travel international business, even non-busy times. Do you think this is going to stay around a long time?
So yes and no. I mean, yes, it will stay around especially on flights that they think they can sell. And they may think it now. In 3 months, they may not think it anymore, right? So it could get less expensive. But there's also incredible value out there. Today, I wrote about ANA, the Japanese carrier that's a United partner. They just changed the aircraft that was flying between San Francisco and Tokyo Haneda from a 787 to a 777 with their new business and first class. And as a result, it's a lot more seats that hadn't been in the schedule, and it loaded with first class award seats every day. And not just business class, first class award seats every day. And as many in some cases, on some days, it was basically between 3 and 5 every day. And so I wrote about this and said, look, it's only gonna, this is gonna go. This isn't gonna last, but it's an incredible bonanza. In fact, let me tell you how to get an even better bonanza. So, instead of paying 100 or 110,000 miles a piece, each, one way per person, Virgin Atlantic also partners with ANA. And they charge 110,000 miles round trip for that same award. And they partner with all of the credit card transfer currencies, and their transfers are instant. So you have to call up Virgin Atlantic, have them set up the award. When the reservation is literally set up, you're online at membershiprewards.com or Chase Ultimate Rewards, and you make your transfer. And then while you're on the phone with them, they issue the ticket. But you're saving half the miles. I think it's a value because it's a lovely, one of the best products in the world with fantastic food and service. I think it's a phenomenal product. Anyway, but it was available basically every day for months. And that was a huge departure for them. During the pandemic, they pretty much had not offered first class award seats because of uncertainty over their schedule. They didn't know what they were going to be flying, what planes they were going to be flying that would even have first class. So they didn't want to give away seats that they couldn't fulfill.
Got it. Jane asked a follow-up question about Point.me. If I want to use your concierge service, do I also need to pay a membership fee as well as the per ticket concierge charge?
No, the membership fee will give you a discount on the concierge service, but you can do just the concierge service.
Got it. Okay. Wendy Paul wanted to know how you flew to Auckland, and did you use points on Air New Zealand?
I didn't use points. We just bought 4 Air New Zealand tickets. It was when they had just introduced their new nonstop from JFK to Auckland. And it was expensive, but it wasn't nearly as expensive as what those tickets ended up. When I went back a few months later, I couldn't believe it. The seats were like twice as much. But I mean, I think, Gary, it's what you were saying. It's, there are certain routes. I mean, like Australia, it's hard. New Zealand is hard, right? To get.
Well, and look, when countries first reopened, the amount of demand, and it took time for the airlines to fully build back up. And so you didn't have the schedules. And so every flight was full at a premium. There weren't these seats because they were able to command a tremendous price. Air New Zealand as well has long been very, very difficult to book business class awards on. And by long, I mean for 10 years. It used to be that exactly 60 days out, they would open up some seats. They pretty much stopped doing that, except occasionally they'll do it, for a day by mistake. They'll write about that and then it'll be gone. So yeah, getting Air New Zealand business class awards between the US and Australia, if you, so I had to clarify that because historically Air New Zealand, Auckland to Shanghai, you could get, but like US and Auckland was almost impossible, except for very rare times.
Anne says, I used BA points to book Iberia flights to Madrid and then connecting on to Milan. I would have preferred a direct flight. I also still had to pay hundreds of dollars. Would there have been a better way to use BA points to fly direct to Milan? What would you have recommended?
Well, without knowing what seats were available on that route on the given day, it's hard for me to, or for that matter, where we're flying from. It's hard for me to say exactly who would have had the best seats, but I can tell you that how you might have saved on the specific itinerary that you booked. Everyone should open up an Iberia Avios account. And the reason for that is that you can transfer points back and forth between British Airways, Iberia, also Aer Lingus, and Qatar Airways. They all use Avios as the currency. You can all transfer the points as long as the accounts are, have aged past a month and have had some activity of any kind. And Iberia is also a transfer partner of Chase, of American Express, as well as some others. And Iberia has some of the best value awards in the world for when you fly Iberia. It can be as low as 68,000 miles round trip in business class, taking, for example, their New York and Boston flights to Madrid. And they don't add on the same fuel surcharges that can be incurred through the British Airways program. So you save on miles and cash by transferring points into Iberia's program only when you are flying Iberia.
I think you in there answered another question. If I could just clarify, Anne asked if you are transferring points or miles to an airline you are not a member of, can you still do that, or do you have to join their program first? When you talked about having it be open for a month, is that across the board?
No, so to transfer into Iberia from British Airways, from Qatar Airways, the account has to be open for a month. To transfer in from American Express, from Chase, you're going to have to open the account so that there's some place for the points to go, but you can do that in real time. Now, I'm super extra cautious, so I tell people I like them to open up an Air France account early before they know they need it. If they're opening it on the day they're going to spend the points, I tell them to call to make the booking, because if you transfer points in right away and redeem them on the website immediately, sometimes their fraud team thinks you're like doing a thing, which I don't think they should, because the tickets are in the name of the person whose account it is and transferred, but sometimes it triggers fraud alerts with Air France. So either having an older account or calling with them, just as a way of avoiding hassle. But yeah, you need an account in order to put points into.
Well, we're at an hour now. Wendy, do you want to pick a few last questions?
Yeah, I think we've got Gary for about another 10 minutes. After that, it's bedtime reading with his daughter. So we're just so happy, Gary, that we can have you for an extra 10 minutes. Thank you. Maybe we can just try to answer as many last questions as we can in that 10 minutes. Here's one. I just want to make sure I understand too. Julie asks, which credit cards give you the most miles per dollar?
The answer is it depends on what you're buying. So, like I said, American Express Platinum gives you 5 points per dollar on airfare. Capital One Venture and Venture X give you 2 points per dollar on everything, right? But they don't have accelerators that give you more than that. In terms of what are the best, in general, earning cards overall, I like the American Express Gold card, which earns 4 points per dollar on groceries up to 25,000 in spend per year, and 4 points per dollar on all your restaurant dining in the U.S. 3x on air travel. The if you're somebody who rents, maybe a lot of folks on this call own their homes, but they have kids who are renting places. I think the Built Rewards MasterCard is really good because it's no annual fee, and in addition to being the same kind of earning as a Sapphire Preferred card from Chase, you have 3 points on your dining and 2 points on travel. It also lets you earn 1 point per dollar spent on rent, up to $50,000 a year. And basically they'll send a check or an ACH to your landlord and they give you the points for that spending, and it doesn't cost you anything. And that's like the biggest expense that most people have, is either their mortgage or their rent. And if you rent, you have this opportunity that most people just leave on the table. So, that's one to consider, but it comes down to, I think usually you want 2 cards, one that bonuses what you spend the most on, and then one that gives you more than a point per dollar, ideally probably in the same program, for your other spending.
Okay. There was a question here about Aeroplan. I'm trying to find it now because somebody was asking, like, it's supposed to be a great program, but they can never seem to find seats.
Well, the answer is, where do you want to go? So Air Canada's Aeroplan is really good for traveling the world in premium cabins. It is not super great if you want to fly Air Canada, because award availability on Air Canada is usually really challenging. And so they will just charge you a whole lot of miles to use your points to basically buy the ticket as though it were cash. And they have more airline partners than anyone else, and that you can combine all of them for the most part. So you can combine Etihad and Oman Air, in the same itinerary, and you can combine Lufthansa with Turkish. That creates lots of opportunities, and virtually everything can be booked on their website. Everything's combinable. You can add a stopover for 5,000 miles. You can have as many stopovers as you want. So it's a very flexible program and high value, but again, you got to get beyond flying on Air Canada with their miles.
Diana is asking, what's the most I can do internationally? 142,000 United miles.
Well, that is roughly speaking a business class round trip on to Europe on a partner airline. It may be that you need to fly United one way and a partner the other. Maybe you'll need to get yourself up to 154,000, for instance, to do round trip business class to Europe. But you can get to much of the world. So I would say the answer is, where do you want to go and how much more do you need, and transfer in a few Chase points. Get a Chase card and transfer in a few Chase points to top it off, and then you'll be there.
So let's just, just so that for everybody because we're not going to be able to get to everybody's questions. So, what are the tools that you really recommend? I mean, there's point.me, and there's if somebody wants to find out how many miles per dollar, what are the best credit cards, or what are the, where can I see which international airlines have the award space? Maybe just go through a few of those tips. And also for, just like, what are some general, what are the sites people need for their travel toolkit to get more information about all of this?
So, I write about all of this. And so, come to my website and, just scroll through and see what I'm writing. If you have questions, come to my website. I put my email address on there. Send me an email. I may answer it directly. It may be something that I write more publicly. But in terms of figuring out what you can do with your miles, I mentioned point.me, but the United.com website has gotten a lot better in terms of its award availability calendar. So you want to see what it costs to go between some cities. I think it's a good idea. If you live in a small city that doesn't have a lot of international flights, don't start entering the city that you live in. Enter the near big city that has a lot of international flights, because what you don't want the challenge to be, maybe that you could fly to Australia and the only flight that wasn't available was the Los Angeles to Phoenix segment, right? What you really want to start with is the hard stuff and then work backwards. Maybe you pick up a Southwest flight to LA and fly to Australia in business class. So start on the website and then just look at the calendar, and it'll show you what that program is going to charge, understanding that other programs may charge fewer points for the same flights. And then that's where it gets into how do you make the most of your transferable points. I like bank transferable points more than an individual airline's miles, because I like the flexibility to book an award that is available to the place I want to go, and have the miles to do it, when I figure that all out, rather than only being able to look in that one program that I have participated in. Now, I may put all my flight miles in one place and earn my elite status, but that doesn't mean that I have to put all of my other earning in that same place, whether it's credit card earning or online shopping, right? And then I can earn these points elsewhere and transfer them where they're most useful. Like, for instance, say that I wanted Delta miles, right? I don't want to, unless I'm using the Delta credit card to earn elite status with Delta, I can earn more Delta miles with an Amex Gold card because it earns points faster than Delta credit cards do. And then I can transfer the points to Delta, or, by the way, to other airlines. And so I have that tremendous flexibility. Amex's program Chase are both very good. Capital One is great. They don't have a US, one of the major US airlines as a partner, which frankly means you can get better value out of some of these other partners. But for people that are just only going to transfer from American Express to Delta or Chase to United, Capital One won't work as well for transfers. But they transfer to Air Canada, they transfer to Turkish, etc. So focusing on those transferable programs, and then you'll have a lot more opportunity when it comes time to redeem to be able to get what you want.
And if you missed it, Gary's website is viewfromthewing.com. That came up in the Q&A. And Jerry also asked, could you repeat the discount code for points.me?
Perrin, Perrin.
Should be easy to remember.
Great, Gary, I love it. I'm going to go take advantage of that for sure. But it's it's points.me or
point singular, point.me.
Exactly. I think it's point.me.
Yeah.
Singular. Great, great. Well, Gary, thank you so much for all that. You're such a fount of information always. For everybody who's been listening to this, we're going to publish this Zoom recording on the website at WendyPerrin.com. We'll also have an article attached to it with sort of like the highlights of what we learned here, because there's so much. I know that like it's a lot to take in. So don't worry, we'll make it all clear for you. We'll be distributing it in the newsletter. And of course, I know a lot of you are thinking, okay, I really need Gary's help for my next trip. So go to point.me. Is that right? Or viewfromthewing.com.
Go to point.me, read me at View from the Wing, send me an email. I'm happy to be helpful if I can.
You're very helpful, Gary. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you,
I know it meant so much to our audience, and have a wonderful night and enjoy bedtime reading with your daughter.
Cheerio.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Wow Week. Have a great weekend. Thanks.